This game is now over 10 years old. Okay, well technically not this game, this is the remaster. I owe Connor and company a much needed apology. I missed AC3's birthday last year in October. It just completely slipped my mind. In fact, I didn't realize it until I remembered that Black Flag will be 10 years old later this year. We all were remembering AC1's 15-year birthday, but we all forgot AC3, so I'm sorry. But the point is, as we get further into the future, this is now what 10-year-old games are going to look like. Can you imagine in 2028 when we're saying a game like Red Dead Redemption 2 is a 10-year-old game? I mean, Unity is turning 10 in 2024. That's next year. This is an almost 10-year-old game. Man, I'm starting to feel old. But like, surely there's no way these are considered bad-looking games in the future, right? Then again, I'm sure the kids of the 90s said the same thing. But anyways, happy late birthday, Assassin's Creed 3. My present to you is this video, because this has always been a very underappreciated game to me. A lot of people think Rogue is the most underrated game in Assassin's Creed, but to me, it's this game. Not only do I love the setting and time period, the Revolutionary War was like my favorite thing to learn about as a kid, but the atmosphere and historical accuracy of its world is incredible. I can't remember which museum, and I believe I said this somewhere in another video before, but when I was visiting Washington, D.C. a few years ago, in a display case on a super fancy TV, they had footage of this game, of Connor walking through Boston and New York on a loop. Again, I can't remember what museum it was exactly, maybe one of you guys might know, but it was a section dedicated to the colonies, and they used this game to show a live representation of what the colonies looked like back then, and I thought that was so cool. I was geeking out about it, of course, while nobody I was with had any idea what I was talking about, but it goes to show just how much detail and research went into creating this game's world when you have a museum using your game as an example. And of course, it's not just the world I love Connor as a protagonist. I feel he's such a misunderstood character. He had a really tough act having to follow Ezio after he just had his entire trilogy ending with Revelations, and Connor was essentially the complete opposite of Ezio, which I believe had to be intentional. I think they wanted to do something different with Connor in AC3, and rather than him being charming, outgoing, and eccentric with a big sense of humor, they went with someone a bit more stoic, introverted, and at times cold, which to me embodies how an assassin would act. Don't get it twisted, that's no slight at Ezio or anything, but to me, when I think of an assassin, I think of a killer, someone who's cold, calculated, and ruthless. That's almost the perfect description of Altair, the original assassin.
And so long as my brothers and I breathe, you will not succeed.
And Connor is a lot like Altair in that sense, just a no-nonsense, badass assassin. However, that doesn't mean that Connor is just that one-dimensional killing machine either, which I think is best shown through those incredible homestead missions. I hope to make a long video in the future, really going in depth on Connor, because I think there's so much below the surface to him. I haven't even talked about some of the other phenomenal characters though, like Haytham Kenway, one of my favorite characters in Assassin's Creed in general. First of all, just the concept and idea of the character is awesome. The son of one assassin protagonist and the father of another, and yet he is a Templar, but he's smart enough to recognize the flaws in both sides and take the best parts of each. That, along with his personality and the outstanding performance by Adrian Huff, Haytham is just so interesting and captivating to watch, regardless if you agree with his views or not, which I think a lot of people do agree with him. He made the Templars empathetic and understandable, and I think the response to his character and how he portrayed a Templar Templar is what led to the creation of a story like AC Rogue that follows a Templar. Not to mention, this game has some of the best moments and scenes in the entire series. One of the ending ones specifically, and spoiler warning here if you're watching this without having played the game, but the scene where Connor finally kills Charles Lee is one of my favorites in the entire series. It was played incredibly well in the mocap, and there's just a sense of beauty to it, if that makes sense. There's not a single word spoken in this scene. Not one. Everything in the scene is told through the character's actions, body language, and expressions. Charles Lee offering that drink to Connor, knowing his death is inevitable, always felt sad to me. It was that show of respect, and I think Charles recognized the mistakes he's made, particularly when it came to Connor, and maybe in a different life, these two wouldn't be enemies. But this scene is seriously one of the best examples of show, don't tell. I had to let it play. It's such a well-acted, directed, and written moment. And then where I feel most people can agree, and probably what a majority of people like most about this game, is the combat. I have to be honest here, I think AC3 may be the peak of Assassin's Creed combat. I don't really think a game in the series has been able to surpass it. The fluidity of it, the unique animations for Connor, the weapon variety, the brutal nature of the fighting style. It's just such an addicting combat system, and it's the only game in the series where I prefer combat to stealth, which is wild considering the stealth aspect is my favorite part of Assassin's Creed. For me, it's one of those combat systems where you can just endlessly keep going. It doesn't get boring. Let's also not forget what a pivotal game in the series this was as a whole. Again, coming off the heels of the Ezio trilogy with a new engine that I think far better suits the look and tone of the series, and it was the first time since 2009 with AC2 that we had gotten a new time period and protagonist to follow, all while wrapping up the modern day storyline that had been building since the very first game. I just made a video talking about Desmond and the modern day as a whole, but I really enjoyed the modern day in AC3. It's probably tied with the first game for my favorite modern day in the series. Granted, the first game's modern day didn't have a lot in the way of gameplay or anything, but it was so ominous and a really fun mystery to unravel. But AC3 is where you finally get the payoff to all of Desmond's experiences across the 5 games. He finally gets to put all he learned to use, and there are some awesome modern day sections in this game. The stadium and fighting right through Abstergo HQ are the ones that really stand out in my mind and make me want to see what a modern day Assassin's Creed would be like. Oh, and how about the soundtrack? I know we love to talk about Jesper Kyd. By the way, I always thought his name was pronounced Jesper, but it turns out it's Jesper, the J is silent. But anyways, we always talk about his incredible work in the first few games, but AC3's soundtrack is so great. Composed by Lauren Balfe, and it's one of the few games where I actually just listen to the OST on my own free time. It's definitely not talked about as much as AC2's OST, but I think it's just as good personally. I just love this game. It's definitely not perfect, it has its flaws as many games do, but it's certainly a unique Assassin's Creed experience that will never be replicated. Back when it came out, it was the best-selling selling AC game of the series and held second place right behind Black Flag for a long time. I think technically Valhalla has now made the most money of the entire series, but that is due to microtransactions and not actual game sales. So AC3, thank you. The reception may not have been overwhelmingly positive on release, but there are still plenty of massive fans of this game over a decade later. So, happy late 10th birthday. Let me know in the comments your feelings of AC3 and some of your stories with this game. I know there's some really good ones out there. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you left a like and considered subscribing to the channel if you're new. Special thank you to my members for supporting me. And other than that, thanks for watching and have a great rest of your day, Assassins.